Hey there, McAllister with Toasty DIY, and today I'm doing a video over how to spice up goblins in your D&D campaign. I'm going to have on screen the book that I'm currently working on, book being about 25 pages, and I'm going to be using it to help give me notes, and you can read it if you're interested. I'll try to make it for free down in the description down below when I finish it, or in any upcoming videos in which I reference it. If you're interested in supporting it, however, when it's finished, it'll go up on DM's Guild for about $5 or something like that. But let's talk about how to make goblins interesting by loading it up here. So the first thing we're going to talk about is where do goblins come from. Right now, I'm not sure. In Volo's Guide to Monsters, they have a lot about different races and whatnot. I don't know if goblins are specifically discussed as where they come from, but we do know their current cultural status and the order of who takes care and who takes charge of who. D&D's writings, goblins are, there's a small group of goblins. Oh, they're actually being controlled or led by a hobgoblin or a bugbear or this, and they're just causing problems, and they're a good starter monster. But let's say you want to dive and open them up a little bit more and make them more creative than just the bedbugs of the forest. That's what we're going to look at here. So initially, we're going to start with their kind of history. To make this fit into your world, just take any deity or god that you have that deals with death or the underworld or whatever your significant afterlife would be, more likely bad afterlife, death, Grim Reaper kind of figure. And in order to find a loyal servant race for him to control, she created the goblins and a bunch of other monsters on the shores of hell. And the reason for doing this is anything that can survive in hell can likely thrive, if not destroy, and cause a lot of death on the material plane. So you can just say a bunch of different races were created. You can call them whatever other races you want, but goblins are the ones that are left, so that's all that really matters. They're the only ones who managed to fight their way through hell. They were scavenging enough, they were strong enough, or they were numerous enough, however you want to look at it, that they carved out a foothold. And after they did, this Grim Reaper deity decided they were worth investigating and came down to visit them and said, "You will make mighty subjects. I will allow you to go to a place far better than this in the material plane, but you, in order to enter this portal and pass through, must serve me." In that agreement, the goblins, some of them said yes, some of them said no. And so now you have a small foothold in hell of goblins that no one really knows about. That's more of a lore fun fact you can do whatever you want with. They could be long dead, or it could be they're really advanced, whatever you want to do. From this background, when they entered through the portal, we ended up meeting 3 different races of goblins. They all worked together in hell, but now that they've hit the material plane, after however many years they've been here, they've split apart and they're not really working together anymore. We have red-skinned goblins known as the blood goblins. We have black and white-skinned goblins known as the bone goblins. And we have the green-skinned goblins known as the rot goblins. So starting with the blood goblins, they're pretty easy to understand at a base level. They are essentially berserkers. They will attack anything. They form raiding parties. They love to kill and murder. And essentially their kind of fun lore is that they have a thing called the death tally. And the more people you kill means the higher you'll be positioned in your afterlife. So they are always keeping a death tally, and it is sacred to them. The leader of the blood goblins is almost always the goblin with the highest death tally. And it is extremely against their heritage to fake a death tally. So if you ever have that as a plot point, that would be extremely detrimental. Even if you want to move your death tally from one object to another, for instance, let's say you have it on, a hammer and you're running out of places to carve, you either keep that hammer forever or take it to your highest member and have them transcribe those things onto another one and then destroy the initial object. They take it very seriously. More often than not, every goblin carries their death tally objects forever once they've decided what they are. Another interesting thing about them is the blood goblins are mostly the biggest raiding people. What they will do for both blood and bone goblins, they will acquire rot goblins into their numbers through different means. Blood goblins will pretty much force them and bully them into being part of their troop. If they find rot goblins in a cave, 1 blood goblin should be able to take on 4 rot goblins. So that's kind of the ratio you'll have. If you have a party of 50 blood goblins, you probably have around 100 rot goblins in that party that they're just controlling. The fun relationship with these blood goblins with the world is that they are constantly raiding if they need to find more supplies, and they are really about killing as many people as they can. They often leave behind a lot of the trinkets. When a blood goblin raid goes through, they mostly steal food and people to kill and do things like that. But they leave a lot of the trinkets. However, since they add a lot of rot goblins to their ranks, a lot of the trinkets and things do go missing, but it's not from the blood goblins. They will hardly ever be found with gold on them. But their death tally objects are of immense importance. If you steal one from a blood goblin, they'll be extremely upset and likely willing to do you a favor in order to get it back. But once they get it back, they'll want to kill you. it's not likely they're going to let you walk away once they have it. The reason that you don't find blood goblins raiding every civilization possible is because their notoriety for being raiders makes them more important to spot than other types of goblins. Having a rot goblin infestation is one thing, but seeing blood goblins usually requires that you call on the aid of a king or baron or count of your region, because a farming village has no chance. So whoever they pay their vassalhood to or their taxes to, they will approach them and say, we've seen blood goblins, because if they come, it is likely that that town will lose. So blood goblin infestations are a good call for adventurers because they're almost always a problem or a small army, especially if it's in the winter where they start to kind of hibernate. They like to raid through the summer and the spring and then get enough stuff to sit in a cave through all the winter. They also will stop raiding if they hear any mention or sight of a necromancer. Because of goblins, dealing with death and being servants of death, at this point in your story, they've likely come through hundreds and hundreds of years ago. The sooner they are to the teleporting event into the material plane, the more reverent they are of death as an actual deity and less of a practice. If it's later, like maybe 300, 400 years, goblins have a short lifespan. This is like the 20th, 40th, 50th generation of goblin. They are still reverent of death, but not as a person, but as a sacrifice and as a thing they do. So death could not appear necessarily tell the goblins to go do something like he could in the past. They've evolved kind of through that, but he still has a large sway over them. So you'll see that more in the bone goblins than you do in the blood goblins. The blood goblins just love death versus the bone goblins who ritualize and cultivate it. So because of blood goblins' connection with death, they're of high value to necromancers. Because they're already connected to death, they are easy to bring back from the dead. Their souls love to stay near dead bodies. So blood goblins hate necromancers because often they try to make marks out of them, and they hate that they disrespect death. It's essentially bringing people back from their tally. And necromancers like to follow blood goblins because they're often killing a bunch of things they can revive. So there's this weird dynamic between them, but likely if you want to have an adventure, you will probably either have the adventurers be hired to kill some blood goblins, but then some undead blood goblins showing up, but then there are angry blood goblins who want that dead, so they're not necessarily killing the party even though they have the troops to do it. So you're raiding a Lich's Keep with an army of blood goblins. Everything falls apart. Blood goblin captains are dying. Players are attacking liches or necromancers or whatever. All this to say, blood goblins are intimately connected with death. They hate necromancers. They love to raid. They're often a problem for smaller kingdoms, and they will send adventurers to stop them, and they like to bully rot goblins. They're pretty simple creatures, but they are intimately connected with death, so don't let that be forgotten, and their death tally is of utmost importance to them. The bone goblins are more the mages and the acolytes and the true carriers or the heralds of death. They have more of a chance to integrate into normal society as paladins and clerics and things like that. However, the ones that still wish to create and cultivate death are quite dangerous. They're usually white-skinned goblins. However, there's a rare chance every so often that they end up being of a black skin. And when they're born with black skin, they're known as skull goblins, and they typically will head whatever sect or cult they are the leader of, because being born with that skin is like a telltale they'll be a great mage. However you want to say it, it's more... they end up being good mages because they're raised believing they're going to be one, so they teach them early, than it is being a skull goblin means you're actually good at these things. It's just kind of like a Dalai Lama being born or a reincarnation of their past leader, things like that. However you want to look at it, black-skinned goblins, these skull goblins, are extremely rare. When you have bone goblins, they will not form into raiding parties of any sort. They will likely try to integrate themselves into some sort of ritual cult, where they'll take an area of forest or they'll take an area near farming village and try to lure people into it. They specifically like to have different markings out to draw adventurers in because they believe themselves ready to fight them. Between their disposable rot goblins that they offer a full-time home, because these bone goblins are more willing to keep and do the upkeep of small raiding parties or defeating people that come into their area. They have enough trinkets and whatnot to keep the rot goblins in their encampment. Most every bone goblin encampment will have some sort of ritual place in the central, most protected area, and this is where the bone goblins will meet to perform rituals that either make the ground unsacred so that holy magic is difficult to work around them. They will do their best to learn spells and to practice their craft. The ultimate goal of most blood goblin cults is to create a skull goblin who can cast the word power word kill. That is supposed to be the most reverent of texts in their word and their tongue, and it's not often you have a goblin that can cast Power Word Kill or Power Word Death. Any way that they can cultivate those necromancy spells, they will be looking to do. So I likely would give one of these as a cool place for your players to learn a very dark spell like Power Word Kill. If you're trying to give that to your players and you tell them that there's a Bone Goblin cult, there's a chance that human cultists have joined in, because as long as death is occurring, the Bone Goblins are more willing to compromise. However, Bone Goblins as well as Blood Goblins are staunchly against Necromancers. The only time those two will ever get together is about destroying a Necromancer. The stronger the Necromancer, the more likely they're going to get along for longer. So that's enough on Bone Goblins and Skull Goblins and whatnot. Let's go on to Rot Goblins. This I have not written anything about, but there's a fun fact about the Rot Goblins. The reason that their skin is green is often because they grow a moss perpetually on them. This happened back when they were in hell. This moss has come from hell. You can call it whatever you want, but think it could be a moss, it could be a slime, but it sticks to their skin and kind of grows off of them. It doesn't seem to stick to the bone or the blood goblins. It's not of a major importance to them. It doesn't cause them to be itchy all day. However, it can become annoying at times when it grows a little bit too thick and they constantly have to trim themselves of this moss. It usually grows in patches. The more bored or tired or less manicured the goblin is, the more it spreads and the more patchy it is. But this rot goblin mentality comes from this moss that will spread off of them to other items. This is more common. If they were to sit and lay under a tree, then likely that moss will grow on that tree. And the thing about the moss is it loves to eat and decay things. So these rot goblins are called that because if they live anywhere long enough, any building, they're essentially like a catalyst for decay. The longer they're in any one location, the quicker it will disappear. And it's the reason that rot goblins are constantly moving and constantly getting found by bone and blood goblins, is because they are constantly roaming with this moss attached to them. So when it comes to rot goblins getting into an encampment, most every encampment they're in will only last a year or so without constant upkeep from a smarter breed of goblin. And by themselves, they're pretty much hopeless. They're your normal goblins, so you still can have that kind of clueless goblin mentality with some of them. But when they're under the control of a higher version or a higher other being, they're a lot more organized. They're a lot more willing to stand up for themselves until they're proven wrong. But these are your normal goblins. The main catch is that they have this moss on them that's very destructive, and it doesn't seem to live long once it's destroyed whatever it's destroying. The moss really only grows well on goblins. If it gets on anything else, it just decays at about an equal mass to whatever it was. So you can think if they lay on a bed, there'll be almost like a small acid spot from where they laid on the bed when they get up and go. There won't be moss there growing then. In most cases, rot goblins are purely followers. Because of this rot, they're forced to move and move and move. And at some point, they'll get caught by adventurers, by blood goblins, or by necromancers, or really any other creature that decides they are bigger and actively stronger than rot goblins. That's my little lore update on goblins. If you want to run something different, I think them being servants of death is a lot more interesting than them just being crazed and killing everything. But I still wanted to keep that basic goblin format in the game, just add some little spin to it, which is that moss. If you find this interesting, let me know in the comments down below. I'd appreciate it. If you have any other ideas on what I can do to spice up the rot goblins themselves without really stripping the entire way of doing goblins ever again. I don't want it to be like, I'm not trying to reinvent a wheel here with goblins. I'm just trying to make some more unique ones because I've never fully understood hobgoblins. Maybe I need to read more into them. Maybe they are this blood goblin kind of format. I was just interested in seeing what we could do with a race that I think is very cool but doesn't often see high level play. And I think that bone goblins can fit that 6th and 7th level, and I think that blood goblins can fit that 3rd to 5th level without having to throw in bugbears or some other stronger race leading them. I think they have the ability to lead themselves. They've just lost it over time as they lose their connection to their deity and a real struggle to survive. So if you have any questions, like I said, leave them down below and any comments also. And then when this book is done, if I finish it, I'm going to put it in the comment down below. So thank you all for watching, and peace.